Noah Whitaker thought he had finally learned how to survive grief until a rainy Saturday morning in Manhattan turned his entire world upside down. Sitting inside a modest midtown diner, his 6-year-old daughter, Maya, suddenly stood on the booth seat, pointed across the room and shouted, "That's Mom." Her voice was so certain, so unshaken that every fork in the diner froze midair. Noah looked up, and what he saw made his breath stop cold. Viewers, imagine being in his place. Would you believe your own eyes, or think grief was playing tricks on you? Tell me in the comments, what would you do if your child swore they just saw their dead mother alive? Stay with me, because what Noah discovered next will shake you even more than this first moment. The woman Maya pointed to wasn't just any waitress. She was young, her hair pulled back in a careless sweep, and her eyes carried that amber glow Noah had kissed goodnight 1,000 times before. Her name tag read Clara, but the resemblance to Isabel Noah's late wife was chilling. The same half-smile, the same tilt of her head, even the faint scar above her brow. Isabel had gotten that scar years ago opening a stubborn box of wind chimes in their Boston home. Noah's stomach clenched. It was impossible. Isabel was gone, and yet here pouring coffee for strangers was her reflection. Maya's little hand clutched his sleeve. "Daddy, it's her, I know it." There was no tremor in her voice. To her, this was not coincidence, it was recognition. Noah tried to steady her, whispering, "Sweetheart, it just looks like her." But even as he spoke, doubt was clawing at him. Because Clara didn't just look like Isabel. She moved, like her, carried herself with the same quiet rhythm. When she placed a plate of pancakes in front of Maya, she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, not with her fingers, but with the side of her wrist, an odd little gesture Isabel used to do when her hands were full. Noah's pulse pounded. It wasn't rational. It wasn't logical. But grief doesn't live in logic, and neither did the way Clara's voice caught him off guard when she said, "Chocolate chip, right? That's the best kind." It was warm, gentle, and almost too familiar. Maya stared at her like she had just found a missing piece of her heart. Clara smiled back, unaware of the storm she had just stirred. Then came the detail Noah couldn't ignore. On the receipt, Clara sat down, she'd doodled a tiny star in the corner. Isabel used to do the exact same thing on napkins at bedtime, telling Maya that stars were reminders of what we never lose. Noah froze. That private ritual was something only their little family had shared. He reached for the receipt as though touching it might confirm the impossible. The diner was filling up. A man at the counter lifted his phone as if to snap a photo of the billionaire eating breakfast with his daughter, but Noah's discreet security detail, always lingering nearby, intervened quickly. Noah hardly noticed. His entire focus was on Clara, who at that moment laughed at something a customer said, her shoulders shaking in a way that was almost identical to Isabel's. Maya whispered again, "She draws stars, Daddy, just like Mom." She pulled out an old napkin she'd kept from their memory box at home, one with Isabel's shaky star sketch. Noah couldn't find words. It felt as if the city outside had gone silent. The longer he looked at Clara, the less she seemed like a stranger. She wasn't Isabel, but she wasn't just anyone either. She was tethered to their lives in a way he didn't yet understand. When Clara came back to refill coffee, she caught Noah staring. He fumbled for words. "You remind me of someone I used to know." She gave a polite nod, but the softness in her eyes told him she'd heard that before. She placed the pot down, and just before she turned, Noah noticed something gleam on her wrist. A silver charm shaped like a ginkgo leaf. Isabel's favorite tree, the one she had insisted they plant in their Boston backyard, because it symbolized endurance and memory. It was too much. The scar, the habit with her hair, the stars, now the ginkgo. These were not just accidents. They were pieces of Isabel stitched into another life. Noah's heart raced as if he were standing on the edge of something enormous, something that could break him or save him. Clara caught him staring again and spoke carefully, her voice carrying a strange weight. "Your daughter called me Mom," she said. "That isn't the first time someone has." Noah felt his entire body lock. Maya's wide eyes flickered between them, as if waiting for him to confirm what she already believed. In that diner beneath buzzing lights and the smell of frying bacon, Noah realized this was no coincidence. Clara Reyes was not just a look-alike waitress. She was a door, and stepping through it would change everything. Noah Whitaker did not return to the diner for pancakes. He returned because something inside him refused to let go. That afternoon, with rain still clinging to Manhattan sidewalks, he circled the block 3 times before finally walking back toward the chrome-plated door. Maya was home with her nanny, unaware that her father was about to step once again into a place that felt like a portal between grief and something dangerously close to hope. Clara was wiping down tables, her hair falling into her face, her sleeves rolled above her wrists. She looked up and paused when she saw him. There was no shock, no smile, only the kind of guarded recognition one gives to someone who might be carrying more questions than they should. Noah walked straight to her station, his voice steady but low. "I need to talk to you. Not as a customer, as a man who just lost his wife." For a moment, she said nothing. The diner's clatter filled the silence. Then she glanced toward the back door. "My shift ends in 15 minutes. Her voice was careful, deliberate, like a person who had learned to weigh every word. They met on a bench near a newsstand by Lexington Avenue. The traffic hummed, umbrellas clicked shut as pedestrians hurried past, but for Noah it felt like the world had narrowed to just 2 people. Clara clasped her hands in her lap, staring at the pavement. "This isn't the first time someone thought I looked like somebody they loved," she said. "But your daughter?" She was so sure. Noah leaned forward. "It isn't just the way you look, it's the things you do. The scar, the stars, the charm on your wrist, they're not random." Clara finally looked at him. "You think I'm your wife?" There was no anger in her tone, just weariness. "I don't know what I think," he admitted. "But I can't walk away until I understand." The conversation stretched late into the evening. Clara told him what little she knew. She had grown up in foster care, bounced between homes in Queens, then spent a single year in Denver that she refused to talk about. She knew she had been adopted, but the details were vague, blurred by years of unanswered questions and sealed records. She had no photographs of her parents, no birth certificate she trusted. The only document she possessed was a faded card from a Boston adoption agency, stamped with the year 1994. Boston. The word struck Noah like a bell. Isabel had been born in Boston. Her childhood stories were filled with cobblestone streets in Beacon Hill summers by the Charles River. He pressed gently. "Do you remember anything else?" "Names, dates." Clara shook her head. "Just that I was told my birth mother couldn't keep me. She was young, poor, alone. That's all I was ever given." Noah sat back, his mind racing. This was more than resemblance, more than coincidence. This was a thread, faint but undeniable, that led directly into Isabel's past. He couldn't ignore it. He wouldn't. The following morning, he called a private investigator he trusted, a man named Daniel Mercer, who had pulled Noah's company out of legal snares more than once. "I need everything you can find about a Boston adoption in 1994, Noah instructed. "Female child, birth mother unknown. Agency stamp matches the name Eastgate Adoption Services." Daniel's reply was blunt. "Eastgate shut down years ago, not clean. A lot of their records got buried. But if you want me to dig, I'll dig." While the search began, life inside the Whitaker penthouse remained taut with tension. Maya, sharper than her years, noticed her father's distraction. One night, as he tucked her into bed, she asked, "Are you trying to find her?" Noah hesitated. His instinct was to shield her, but her eyes carried the same quiet force that had led her to point at Clara without hesitation. "I'm trying to find answers," he admitted, "because answers matter." Maya studied him for a long moment. Then she whispered, "If she's not Mom, maybe she's still family." The simplicity of the statement cut straight through him. He kissed her forehead, but when he left her room, he carried her words like a weight. Days later, Daniel returned with fragments of truth. "You were right to look at Boston," he told Noah in his office. Eastgate placed dozens of children in the early 90s. Paperwork was sloppy, but I found one case female infant abandoned at St. Anne's Hospital in Beacon Hill. Records suggest she had a twin, but the details are conflicting. One file says the twin died. Another says the twin was claimed by a relative. Noah's chest tightened. Isabel was an only child. At least that was what she had always believed. But what if that belief was never true? Daniel slid a photocopy across the desk. It was a yellowed intake form from St. Anne's. In the margin, almost faded beyond legibility, someone had doodled a star. 5 points sketched in hurried pen. Noah stared at it, his pulse hammering. A star. Again. The pattern that would not let him go. He flew to Boston within the week. He didn't tell Maya the details, only that he had business. Beacon Hill smelled of brick and rain, just as Isabel had once described. At St. Anne's, now a renovated community center, he tracked down a retired nurse who remembered the adoption scandals of the 90s. She was cautious, her hands trembling around her teacup. But when Noah showed her Clara's photo, she whispered, "She looks like the one they said was lost." The nurse explained what she remembered. 2 infants, both girls born the same night. The mother too ill to care for them. The paperwork shuffled the infants separated. One was placed through official channels. The other, Clara, was listed as abandoned, then rerouted quietly through Eastgate. Noah left St. Anne's with the weight of truth pressing against his chest. He stood on the cobblestones of Beacon Hill, the same streets Isabel had once called home, and felt the impossible settle into shape. Clara wasn't Isabel, but she wasn't just anyone either. She was tethered by blood, by history, by something bigger than coincidence. When he returned to New York, he met Clara again on that same bench by the diner. He told her what he'd found. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she asked the question he had been avoiding. "If I'm her sister, does that make me your responsibility? Or does it make me a reminder you can't handle?" Noah had no answer. Not yet. He only knew that the stars kept appearing, the threads kept pulling, and every path was leading him further into a story he had never imagined he'd be forced to live. The investigation in Boston had opened a door Noah Whitaker could no longer close. The faint records, the testimony of the retired nurse and the star, scribbled in the margins of a decades-old file, pointed to one conclusion. Clara Reyes was not just a stranger who happened to resemble Isabel. She was family. But the trail did not end in Massachusetts. It led further west to New Mexico, and to a name neither Clara nor Noah had expected to hear. The lead came in the form of a sealed envelope tucked away in the archives of Eastgate Adoption Services, unearthed by Daniel Mercer's persistence. The paper was brittle, the ink smudged, but the words were legible enough for the daughter I could not keep. "If ever you search, look for me in Santa Fe. My name is Marina Alvarez." When Noah read the note aloud to Clara, her face went pale. She gripped the edge of the bench outside the diner so hard her knuckles whitened. Santa Fe, she whispered, as if the city itself was a riddle. She had never been there, never even thought about New Mexico. Yet here it was, written in her mother's hand, a beacon pointing across the country. Clara wanted to leave immediately, but Noah convinced her to wait until they could arrange the trip properly. 2 days later, they boarded his private jet, the skyline of Manhattan receding beneath them. Clara sat by the window, silent, her backpack clutched on her lap like a shield. Noah watched her and felt a strange collision inside him. Grief for Isabel, awe for this unexpected twin, and a responsibility that grew heavier with each mile. Santa Fe greeted them with clear skies and sharp light. The Georgia O'Keeffe Museum stood near the plaza, and as they walked past it, Clara paused at the banners painted with wide strokes of desert blooms. "It feels like I've seen this before," she murmured. She couldn't explain why, but the shapes, the colors, the dry warmth of the air pressed against something buried deep in her memory. They met a local archivist who had agreed to guide them through the parish records. In the basement of an adobe church, dusty ledgers revealed pieces of the story. A birth recorded under the name Alvarez, a note of illness, a discharge to St. Anne's Hospital in Boston. The details matched, though many pages had been lost to time and fire. It was not enough for Clara. She wanted to see her mother. The address was small, a weathered house on the edge of Santa Fe near a line of cottonwoods that bent toward a dry arroyo. Marina Alvarez opened the door slowly. She was in her late 50s, her hair streaked with silver, her face etched with lines that spoke of hardship more than age. At first, she only stared. Then her hand flew to her mouth. "Clara," she breathed. The name fell with the weight of recognition. Clara froze, unable to move her throat tight. Noah placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, but she shook him off and stepped forward on her own. "You know me." Marina nodded, her eyes wet. "I never forgot. I was told you had died, but I prayed every night that it wasn't true." They sat at her kitchen table, the walls around them lined with framed pictures of saints and faded photographs of landscapes. Marina's voice shook as she spoke. She had been only 19 when she gave birth to twin girls. Her husband had died months earlier in a construction accident. She had no money, no family support, no way to raise 2 children. One infant had been taken into the care of a distant relative, Isabel. The other, Clara, had been surrendered to the system. "I begged them not to separate you," Marina said, twisting a worn rosary between her fingers. "But they said it was best. I believed them because I had no power. And then, when I asked for you, they told me you were gone." Clara's hands trembled. "All these years you could have come for me." Marina's face crumpled. "I tried. Eastgate closed its doors to me. Records disappeared. I was just a poor woman with no lawyer, no influence. Every door slammed shut." Noah listened, his jaw tight. He thought of all the boardrooms he had walked into where money opened every lock. And here was this woman, standing outside closed doors until her strength broke. Marina excused herself for a moment and returned with a wooden box. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. She placed it in Clara's hands. "I wrote this for you when you were a baby. I didn't know if you would ever see it. But I needed you to know I loved you from the beginning." Clara unfolded the letter, her tears dripping onto the fragile paper. It spoke of hope, of regret, of a love too strong to vanish with absence. At the bottom, Marina had drawn a small 5-point star. The room fell silent. Noah could hear his own heartbeat, could see Clara's hands shaking as she traced the star with her finger. The pattern again, the reminder that tied all of them together. Later that evening, they walked outside into the desert dusk. The horizon glowed purple and orange, the air thin and cool. Clara stood alone for a long time, her gaze fixed on the sky. When Noah approached, she said quietly, "All my life, I thought I was no one's. Now, I have too many ties to carry." "You're not alone," Noah told her. "Not anymore." They stood together under the wide sky, the first stars beginning to pierce the twilight. For Clara, the journey had only begun. For Noah, the discovery of Marina Alvarez was more than an answer, it was a reckoning. His late wife's life had been shaped by a secret she never knew, and now that secret was living, breathing, standing in front of him. As they returned to the house, Marina whispered a final confession. "There was someone else who helped me then, a benefactor. I never knew his name, but he paid for the hospital bills, kept you both alive. He left only a mark, a star." Noah felt the words strike deep, the same symbol, the same thread appearing again and again. Stars scattered across years, across lives, binding them together. In that moment he understood this was no coincidence. This was a story that had waited decades to surface, and now it was pulling them all toward something even larger than the truth already revealed. Back in New York, life did not return to normal. It could not. The truth revealed in Santa Fe had shifted everything for Noah Whitaker, for Clara Reyes, and most of all, for Maya. The 6-year-old's world had cracked open in ways she could not fully explain, and yet she was the one who kept asking the simplest questions that no adult could answer cleanly. The first meeting between Clara and Maya after Santa Fe was not orchestrated with fanfare. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning in Central Park. Noah had chosen the spot deliberately, a bench near the boating pond shaded by oaks. Clara arrived looking hesitant, her hair loose, her hands clasped tight, as though she had walked into an interview she wasn't prepared for. Maya sat on the bench, swinging her legs, her eyes watchful, carrying a mix of hope and suspicion that only children can manage. When Clara sat down, the silence pressed in. Maya studied her face for a long time. "You look like her," she finally said. Clara nodded. "I know, but I'm not your mom, Maya. I'm Clara. I'm Isabel's sister." The words landed gently without force. Maya frowned, chewing on them as if deciding whether to accept them. Then she asked, "Does that mean you're my aunt?" Clara hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Yes, if you'll have me." Maya leaned back, still staring. "Aunt Clara," she tried aloud. It sounded strange but not wrong, and in that fragile moment a boundary was set. Clara would not be a replacement. She would be herself. And somehow that was enough to let Maya's small hand slip into hers. But boundaries are not walls. They bend and strain. Weeks later, a storm broke. A tabloid photographer had followed Noah and Clara leaving a midtown restaurant. By morning, headlines blared across newsstands, "Whitaker Widow's double mystery woman at Billionaire's side." The story spread online within hours, photographs twisted into speculation. Some accused Noah of trying to replace his late wife. Others questioned Clara's motives. For Clara, who had spent her life anonymous, the glare was unbearable. She locked herself in her small apartment for 2 days, refusing Noah's calls. When he finally knocked on her door, she opened it with eyes red from sleepless nights. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't ask to be paraded like some ghost." Noah stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Neither did I, but we can't run from it." We set the record straight together. "The truth is stronger than the noise." She looked at him with doubt. "And what if the truth hurts your daughter?" At that Noah faltered, but before he could reply, Clara added softer now. "Then we tell it carefully. We let her decide what's too heavy for her to carry." It was during this time that Noah sought to give Clara something tangible, something grounding, beyond the noise. He arranged a trip to Seattle, away from the frenzy of New York. He told her it was for work, but it was more than that. It was escape space to breathe. At Pike Place Market, surrounded by flowers and fishmongers shouting prices, Clara found herself drawn to a small stall of handmade wooden boxes. One in particular caught her eye, a delicate music box carved with swirling leaves, its tune faint and sweet when wound. Clara lifted it, her hands trembling. "My mother used to hum this," she whispered. "I don't know how I know, but I do." The artisan, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, explained he had restored the box from an old design common in New Mexico decades earlier. Clara bought it without hesitation, clutching it as though it was proof of something she couldn't yet explain. That night, back in the hotel, she wound the box again. The melody filled the room, fragile and persistent. Noah watched her close her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks silently. "It feels like I've come home to something I never knew I lost," she said. Seattle gave them another unexpected gift. While walking along the waterfront, a sudden rainstorm drenched the streets. Clara froze under the awning of a cafe, panic rising sharp and fast. She confessed between gasps that thunderstorms had terrified her since childhood, though she never knew why. Maya, clutching her small raincoat, took Clara's hand and whispered, "It's okay." Mom used to say the thunder was angels bowling. The innocence of the words cut through the panic. Clara let out a shaky laugh, then bent to hug Maya, her shoulders trembling as the storm passed. It was the first time she allowed herself to lean into the role of aunt to take comfort, instead of only giving it. Back in New York, the public scrutiny did not vanish, but something in Noah had changed. He stopped apologizing for Clara's presence in their lives. When a reporter shouted across a sidewalk demanding to know if he was replacing Isabel, Noah replied calmly, "No one can replace Isabel. Clara is her sister, and she is family." The moment was caught on camera, and while critics remained, the narrative shifted. Clara was no longer framed as an imposter, but as a rediscovered piece of a hidden past. Still, the private doubts did not fade easily. Clara confessed late one evening that she feared becoming only a shadow of Isabel, never herself. Noah looked at her with steady conviction. "You are not here because of how you look. You're here because of who you are. Maya knows it. I know it. That's enough." The following week, a sealed envelope arrived. It was the result of the DNA test they had quietly taken weeks earlier when doubt had demanded proof. Noah opened it at his desk, the sterile words spelling out what their hearts already knew. Clara Reyes was Isabel Whitaker's twin sister. The science had caught up to the truth. But attached to the report was an addendum Noah hadn't expected, a note from the adoption agency's legal archive. It suggested irregularities in the Eastgate files, questions of consent and custody, even the possibility of legal claims still unresolved. It was a reminder that truth often comes tangled with consequences. Noah sat with the papers in his hand, staring out at the skyline. He thought of Maya's trust, Clara's tears in Seattle Marina's letter in Santa Fe. Proof had arrived, but proof was not the end. It was the beginning of a new storm they would all have to weather together. The first buds of spring had barely opened in Central Park when Noah made a quiet decision. He and Clara had spent months carrying the weight of revelations, of headlines, of questions without simple answers. But life demanded more than survival. It demanded renewal. That's when the idea of planting a tree first came to him. A small cherry sapling, fragile yet determined, could stand as a marker of what they had lost and what they had found. On a clear Sunday morning, with Maya skipping ahead on the path, they gathered at a small clearing, not far from where Clara and Maya had first spoken. Noah carried the sapling carefully while Clara held a wooden box in her hands. Inside were tokens they each had chosen to bury beneath the roots. For Noah, it was a folded drawing Maya had once given Isabel, stick figures of a family under a bright sun. For Clara, it was the music box melody written out in her own hand, as if capturing memory on paper. For Maya, it was a simple bracelet of colorful beads, too small for her now, but precious because Isabel had helped her thread it. As they placed the items into the ground and lowered the tree into place, The act felt both ceremonial and raw. Maya pressed the soil with her small hands, whispering, "So it can grow strong like Mommy wanted me to." Clara bent beside her, eyes wet but smiling. "And so it can remind us that love doesn't vanish, it takes root." Noah said nothing. He only rested his hand over theirs, feeling the weight of past and future settle into the earth together. But renewal didn't end there. Days later, Noah suggested a trip, this time to Charleston, South Carolina. It wasn't business that pulled him south, but something deeper. Isabel's grandmother had once lived there, and in sorting through old papers, Noah had discovered a fragile letter tucked away. It mentioned a house, a garden Isabel had loved as a child, and a request that family one day come back to see it. Clara agreed hesitantly, unsure of what ghosts they might stir. Yet, when they arrived in Charleston, greeted by streets lined with magnolias and the hush of salt air rolling off the harbor, the city felt less haunted than expectant. The house itself was modest, weathered, but dignified, its white shutters peeling from years of sun. On the porch, a neighbor, a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a warm drawl, introduced herself as Mrs. Holloway. "You must be kin to Eleanor Whitaker," she said, her gaze shifting curiously from Noah to Clara. "Haven't seen family here in decades." Noah nodded. "Isabel was her granddaughter, my late wife." At the mention, Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. She used to sit out back under that oak reading, said it made her feel less alone. She looked at Clara, then, eyes narrowing, as though trying to reconcile memory with the face before her. "And you?" "My word, child, you're the spitting image." Clara felt a chill, though she managed a polite smile. Later, walking the garden, she admitted quietly, "It feels like I've stepped into a place that already knew me." The garden was overgrown vines curling around wrought iron fences, flowers pushing through cracks in stone. Maya darted ahead, chasing a butterfly, her laughter echoing across the yard. Clara paused beneath the oak Mrs. Holloway had mentioned. She touched its rough bark, closing her eyes. "She must have sat here wondering about me," she whispered, maybe not even knowing why. Noah, standing beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "And now you're here, finishing the circle." In Charleston, they stayed longer than planned. Clara spent mornings sketching the house, capturing details of shutters, chimneys, and blossoms in a way that seemed to calm her restless heart. Noah found himself at peace in the slower rhythm of the town, far from New York's relentless pace. And Maya, with her boundless curiosity, brought life back to corners of the garden long forgotten. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon over the Ashley River, Clara and Noah sat on the porch with glasses of iced tea. The cicadas hummed like a low chorus, and for the first time in a long while, silence between them felt like comfort instead of burden. Clara broke it softly. "I've been afraid of becoming only her shadow, but here I feel different. Like I can exist as myself and still carry her with me." Noah studied her face in the dimming light. "You're not her shadow, Clara. You're her sister, her blood, but you're also you. That's what Maya sees. That's what I see." Clara looked down, her hand tightening around the glass. "And what do you want me to be?" The question lingered in the humid air. Noah didn't rush to answer. Finally, he said, "Part of this family, however that takes shape. Not as a replacement, not as an echo, as you. It was a promise, unadorned, but real." Clara felt it settle in her chest like a key turning in a long-locked door. On their last day in Charleston, Maya insisted on planting flowers in the garden, "so it won't feel lonely anymore," she explained. Together, they cleared a small patch by the oak and set bright marigolds into the soil. Clara knelt beside her dirt, smudged on her hands, and whispered, "This is your garden, now too." Noah watched from the porch, struck by the simple miracle unfolding before him. The billionaire who had once lived in silence and grief was now witness to something money could never buy, the rebirth of family fragile yet stubborn like roots pressing through stone. As they packed to leave, Clara slipped the music box into her bag. She wound it once more, letting the tune fill the house. Maya twirled in the doorway, giggling. Noah stood still listening. The melody didn't sound like grief anymore. It sounded like promise. Back in New York, when they returned to the cherry sapling in Central Park, new leaves had begun to unfurl. Maya ran to it, hugging the slender trunk. "It's growing," she cried. Clara and Noah exchanged a glance, wordless but heavy with meaning. Renewal takes time, but it had begun. They had planted more than a tree. They had planted the future. And though storms would come, though shadows of the past might rise again, they had learned that roots, once set deep, could weather anything. It was not a perfect ending. It was something better, a beginning that belonged wholly to them. Looking back on Noah Whitaker's journey, it becomes clear that what began as a chance encounter in a New York diner became something far larger than anyone could have imagined. A grieving billionaire father, his curious and hopeful daughter, and a waitress who turned out to be the living image of the woman he lost. These threads wove together into a story about truth identity and the resilience of family. Each step they took through New York, Boston, Santa Fe, Seattle, and finally Charleston revealed not just secrets buried in the past, but opportunities for healing in the present. For Noah, it was about facing the grief he had tried to outrun. For Clara, it was about stepping out of the shadow of being the double and realizing she had her own place, her own worth. And for young Maya, it was about learning that love does not disappear when people leave it. Changes, shape grows in new directions and continues in unexpected ways. The cherry tree planted in Central Park and the flowers set in Charleston's garden were not just symbols. They were living reminders that renewal is possible even after unbearable loss. This story also reminds us that family is not always what we expect. Sometimes it is found through bloodlines long hidden, sometimes through the bonds we choose to honor. It is not about replacing what is gone, but about building something new, while carrying forward the memories of those we have loved. Noah discovered that he didn't need to erase Isabel to make space for Clara. Clara realized that she didn't need to be Isabel's replacement to matter in Maya's life. Together, they proved that honoring the past and embracing the present can coexist. The deeper lesson here is universal grief and love are intertwined, and healing often comes not in grand revelations but in the quiet moments when we decide to keep moving forward. Life will hand us storms, secrets, and losses we never asked for, but it also offers second chances, unexpected connections, and the courage to plant something new in the soil of what was once broken. For each of us, watching the question is, what tree are we willing to plant today? Maybe it's reaching out to a family member we've lost touch with. Maybe it's forgiving ourselves for choices we made in difficult times. Or maybe it's daring to build a new chapter after one has ended. Like Noah, Clara, and Maya, we cannot undo the past, but we can choose how we carry it into the future. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own struggles and your own hopes, I invite you to reflect on the people and promises that matter most in your life. Let it be a reminder that even after loss, life has a way of giving us unexpected gifts if we have the courage to embrace them. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Your support gives us the strength and motivation to keep creating stories like this, stories that inspire, heal, and connect us all. Stay with us because more powerful and unforgettable journeys are coming your way.